Let's talk about how to take your projects from good to great with perfect edge finishing. Welcome back, episode 5, we've made it. This is the 5th and final episode of our fundamental skills that you need to know for leather crafting. If you've made it this far, awesome. If you need to get caught up on the first 4 episodes to know all the steps that happen before finishing, go get caught up on those and then come back to this one. But yeah, let's get into today's topic, which is finishing edges. The best way to make your leather projects look more professional is to really focus on those finishing touches like finishing the edges and applying leather conditioner. This video will cover the 3 main finishing techniques, which are burnishing, dyeing, and painting. I'll walk you through my favorite processes for each of these techniques and show you some side-by-side comparisons so you can decide which products or techniques you might want to try out for yourself. Let's quickly define the term burnishing, which you'll hear me say a lot in this video. It's the process of compressing and polishing those fibers to create a glossy, smooth finish. And burnishing not only improves the look of leather, but by sealing the edge in this way, the leather retains its natural oils and moisture and it won't dry out. It also creates a waterproof barrier for added durability. I'll be using natural veg tan leather for my demonstrations today since it burnishes a little bit better than chrome tan leather. You can and should finish edges on chrome tan leather, your results just might not be quite as clean as when you use veg tan. And here's the chart that we made that kind of shows some of the differences between veg and chrome tan leather. If you want a more in-depth look at the differences between these 2 types of leather, you can check out this video right here. Before we can burnish, dye, or paint the edges, it's important to do some prep work. Firstly, you'll need to sand the edges flat and smooth. This is especially true if you're working with multiple layers of leather. We want the layers to be flush and 90 degrees from the surface of the workpiece. Additionally, sanding sets us up for success when we get to burnishing, since it gives us a head start at removing and laying down those loose fibers on the edge. If you skip this step, your burnishing will look uneven. While sanding, I keep the speed on low, apply very light pressure, and constantly move the workpiece to make sure that I'm not burning the leather. Because you don't want your leather to be burnt like this. You can sand by hand or with a burnishing machine like this. You'll get great results either way. This machine is just a huge time saver. As I start sanding these samples, let's talk about sandpaper grits. I use 120 or 180 grit to even out the layers and make sure everything's flush. You could use a more aggressive grit like 80 to remove the material more quickly, but it's a bit easier to accidentally overdo it with lower grits like that. Now that everything is flat and square, we can move on to the next step, but I like to take just a few extra seconds and sand all the way up to 320 grit. This will smooth things out even more and improve the look of the final product. If you want a crazy polished mirror finish, you could sand all the way to 2,000 or 3,000 grit, but I'll probably save specialty techniques like that for another video. Once we have finished sanding, we need to bevel the edges. This means we're knocking off that corner so we can get a smooth, rounded profile. The tools used for this are usually called edge bevelers or just edgers. Some have a flat blade that removes the corner by cutting a 45-degree angle, and this creates a chamfered edge that looks unique in itself, or you can round it out by sanding and burnishing. My preferred tool is a grooved edger, which has a curved blade that cuts a rounded profile into the leather. And both of these tools come in different sizes based on the thickness of leather that you're using. The larger the size, the more material the tool removes. Here's a size chart for both of these type of edgers. My most used sizes are 00 and 0 since I prefer a more subtle bevel, but I do keep a size 2 edger in my shop for heavy belts and straps. Using these tools is simple. You just place them on the edge at about a 45-degree angle and push forward while keeping pressure and angle consistent. This is such a fun tool to use. I just love watching those little strings curl up as I cut. Now that the prep work is done, let's go over how to burnish, dye, and paint leather edges. Burnishing is by far my favorite and most used technique. It maintains the same color of the leather, it just adds some shine to it and improves the durability of the item. It also takes less time and effort than the other 2 options that we're going to go over today, so subconsciously, maybe that's why I always choose it. Here's my process. I start off by using water as the burnishing agent. I apply a light coat of water and burnish it for about 20 seconds, and use the wood slicker or burnishing machine. Starting off with the water will slightly darken the edges, and I'm a fan of the way that looks. With just water, we already have some great results, but let's shine it up a little bit more with gum tragacanth. I apply it with my finger or an edge pen and repeat the process I just did for the water, which is rubbing it for about 20 seconds. Gum trag is one of the most popular burnishing agents, along with another product called Tokonol. Both are great products, but I use gum trag since it soaks deeper into the leather fibers and it won't stain your leather as much if you happen to spill some on the surface. And I usually do a final pass, but this time I'll burnish with a canvas cloth. It helps me get a bit more shine and it also allows me to use my finger, so feel for any bumps or rough patches or sharp corners. I like to set the piece flat on the table and take a final pass and smooth out the corner with my finger and the canvas cloth. An optional last step is applying beeswax, which adds some durability and also some water resistance. Simply rub the wax over the edge of the leather and buff it into the leather using a canvas cloth. You want to make sure you generate lots of friction here so that the wax melts into the leather rather than just sitting on the surface. Dyeing edges is a similar process, we're just adding a step or two. Again, we'll start off with sanding and beveling the edges, and then I apply the dye. I use Beveling's leather dye because it dries quickly, and I use a wool dauber or just a plain old cotton swab to apply it. I like cotton swabs because they're small and allow me to be precise. They do tend to deteriorate a bit, so you may want to have a couple extras available. I start off in the middle and work my way to the rounded edge. Make sure you take your time in this step because you wouldn't want to ruin your project on the last step. Add as many coats as you need to get the color you want. Now that the edge is dyed, we simply burnish with gum trag like we did earlier. You may want to have a separate edge slicker and burnishing cloth for this step since we'll likely rub off a little bit of that dye onto our cloth or slicker. I keep one clean cloth in my shop that is strictly for gum trag and a second cloth that I use for anything with dye or waxes. And now that it's all burnished, that edge is looking great. To lock in the dye, I'd recommend a top coat of leather balm or beeswax. I applied the leather balm, gave it a minute to dry, and then buffed it to a shine. The last edge finishing method is painting. This technique is great for soft leather or chrome tan leather that doesn't burnish well. The product I recommend for this is Beveling's Edge Coat, which is a cross between a paint and a dye. Edge Coat will both sit on the surface of the leather and soak into it. Sanding is especially important when painting edges because the smoother the surface is, the smoother the paint can sit on top of it. I always use the edge dye pen because it gives me the most control and helps me get a crisp, straight line. You could also use a scratch-all to apply it if you don't have an edge pen. Just like with the dye, take your time and start in the middle and then work your way out. If your first coat doesn't look perfect, don't worry. After it dries, buff it and then do a light second coat, which smooths everything out. Once it's dried completely, buff it again for a brighter finish. Another great tip for painting edges is to use some rubbing alcohol to blend and smooth the surface of the edge paint. Make sure you take only 1 or 2 passes so you don't remove too much of the edge coat. Before I end this video, there's one last finishing touch you might want to try on your next project. That would be applying leather conditioner that will clean, hydrate, and protect the leather. Conditioner also adds just a bit of sheen to the leather, which I'm a big fan of. A few products I'd recommend are Otter Wax Leather Oil, Otter Wax Leather Salve, and Beveling's 4-Way Care. And that is everything you need to know to take your project to the next level. The small details make such a big difference in leather crafting. If you want to order any of the tools or products that I use today and try these techniques for yourself, those items will be linked down below. Let me know in the comments what your favorite technique is for finishing edges, and feel free to ask me any questions. I enjoy answering those. And if you've made it to episode 5 in this series, thank you, and I hope you learned a thing or two. It's been a lot of fun to make, and we'll definitely be coming out with lots of DIY tutorials so you can learn how to make projects like this for yourself. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.